Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session, which is a deep dive into 3 critical aspects of Alexa in-skill purchase API. My name is Mohammed Yahya. I am a software development manager with Alexa monetization team. My team built most of the tools that we're going to talk about today, and I'm co-presenting with Sheena. Sheena, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sheena. I'm a UX designer on the Alexa skills team. I work on products that help our customers discover and find the right skills to use at the right time. So we're very excited to talk with you today.
So what we're going to talk about today is 3 aspects of using our monetization APIs. And our goal for the session is to inspire you and give you all the possibilities that are out there for creating monetized products within your skills. So hopefully you've heard or you've watched the brief introduction session about the skills before our session. In this session, but I'm going to give you a little bit of introduction anyway to begin with. What is in-skill purchasing? In-skill purchasing is allowing developers to create and sell products within their skill. Within your skill, you can have free content, which is what most skills are. And then using our APIs, you can create multiple purchase options within the skills. You can create one-time purchases that customers can purchase for a single time and then own it forever. You can create subscriptions, which are monthly or yearly renewed, and the customer pays for it monthly or yearly. Or you can create consumables, which is something that the customer buys, uses, and then they can buy again over and over and over. So what did we do? We, in order for us to see how effective these products are and see how customers react to them, we decided to create a skill ourselves. And in that skill, we tested some of these techniques, and that's what we're going to share with you in this session in the 3 aspects that we're going to talk about. Sheena, you want to introduce the skill?
Yeah, sure. So as Mohammed said, we thought it would be fun to be able to kind of walk you through the whole process in one of the skills that we built. This skill is called Trick or Treat. It's something that we came up with a little over 2 years ago now. And it performed pretty well. And then the next year, we decided to add some in-skill purchasing to it. So Trick or Treat, it's a very simple skill. It basically mimics the experience of, in your childhood, going into a neighborhood and trick-or-treating, going house to house and kind of getting a surprise at each house. So I'm going to let Alexa kind of just introduce the skill to you so you can hear kind of what that customer experience is like.
Welcome to Trick or Treat. You are in Lower Woodland, a strange neighborhood you must explore. As you go out this Halloween, you will need to visit houses to get candy. As the doors open, say trick or treat and receive either a candy or a scary trick. Once you have visited 7 houses, you must head back home. But be warned, if you receive 3 tricks, your turn will be over and you must head back home. As you get candy, you will unlock more achievements. You are in Lower Woodland where there are lots of basic animals. Your next journey starts with your next door neighbor. You approach the house. You ring the doorbell.
So as you can hear, basically you can go to a door, say trick or treat, and this is kind of where the skill decides kind of what fun thing to do next. So let's go over just kind of the quick flow of the skill so you can kind of understand what the CX is like and what the different experiences are in the skill. So as a new user, you can start at the very top of the skill and hear the introduction that you just heard. Or if you're a returning user, you can come back either on the street or at a house to continue your trick-or-treating experience. So basically, in the beginning, you pick a house. You can say left, right, across, and once you approach a house, we have a creature generator that chooses which creature you're going to run into once the door opens. And then the customer says trick or treat. And then we have a reward generator. So from here, you could either get a trick or a treat. If you get a treat, you get a fun little candy sound. And if you get a trick, then your trick count goes up 1. And if you hit 3 tricks, then you're too afraid to go on, which means that you would end the game. So as we were going through the skill, we were thinking through what are some of the fun things we can add to the skill as content, as premium content that customers would want to pay for, right? So we thought about different neighborhoods when you're trick-or-treating. Sometimes, as a child, you think of that one fancy neighborhood where you get better candy or you get full-size candy bars. So we thought it would be fun if we had a themed neighborhood that could have like fun, different sounds that were exclusive. We thought a little bit about how, with games, sometimes you want to sell premium content that helps the user progress faster or helps them to play further. So we thought about maybe potions as a way to help people get over their fear. And then lastly, we were thinking, okay, well, what would be a fun way to kind of have a permanent purchase in the game? And we thought, oh, a werewolf companion might be a fun way to maybe make the game easier for kids or have more fun candy sounds. So we thought of all of these ideas, and then we had to map them to our actual ISPs. So we thought about that fancy neighborhood. That could be fun done as kind of like a limited time pass. So we thought a single consumable gated by time, like let's say 24 hours, could be an interesting way to sell that one. And potions, since that's something that the customers or the users could use over and over again or stack, we thought consumables would be a great way to sell those. And then lastly, the werewolf companion as kind of a one-time purchase. So you purchase it once, he's always your companion, and it kind of just changes and elevates the gameplay for you. So looking at, again, the basic user flow of the skill, it is now kind of our opportunity to find points in that CX to decide where would we want to sell or offer these experiences to the customer using something that we call the upsell directive. So basically, if it wasn't covered before, the upsell directive is an opportunity to be able to kind of give context to the user for what you want to sell before you actually offer the item. So thinking through the CX, there are definitely good places and bad places to place this upsell directive. We thought about in the beginning of the experience. If the customer just started and just used the skill for the first time, it would not be the best time to sell that fancy neighborhood because they don't really understand yet, what the skill does or what their experience is going to be like. So we like to kind of just as a best practice, stay away from selling things too early in the experience. And then we thought about, well, if the fancy neighborhood gives the customer a chance to meet new creatures or have different candy prizes, then we want to make sure that we allow them the chance to get that neighborhood before they start trick-or-treating, right? So we thought that the new neighborhood, when they're picking a house, could be a good time, maybe the second or third visit into the game, or even when they're trick-or-treating, to just kind of remind customers that they can find even more new exclusive sounds if they use if they purchase a new fancy neighborhood. So just to go over again some best practices, when is a good time to ask or when is a bad time? We think that the customer needs context to be able to understand not just what's being offered, but how that would benefit them in their gameplay. So making sure that it comes at a time of immediate need would be a good idea. Or when the customer has explored kind of most of the free options, they're running out of things to do, that could be a good time to offer that new neighborhood to them. A bad time is too early or too often or whenever it's not relevant. And then how would you ask? What's a good way versus a bad way to ask? So making sure that the actual prompt that you're writing gives them enough information to make that decision, right? So for example, here's an example of kind of both ways you could do it. The first one, you visited all the houses. There's a fun new zombie neighborhood you can try. Would you like to buy it? Versus giving a little bit more context and giving them a little bit more kind of information on what they would get with this purchase, right? So for example, for even more fun sounds and thrills, visit our exclusive neighborhood for a limited time. Zombie Wasteland is full of unexpected surprises. Want to learn more? And what we found is giving this more context, and actually even though we're adding friction with this extra prompt, it really warms up the customers more, and we see actually a higher conversion because of that. And then the last question is, when do we need to back off upsells, right? So we talked a little bit about where we should insert them in the CX, but then we should also be smart about when not to ask. So for example, when they've just started or when they've just been offered something, that might be something that you want to kind of hold back from offering again, especially if the customer said no. And then also maybe when they already have inventory. So if they've already purchased something, we want to make sure we're not asking them to buy the same thing again. So to talk a little bit about how you would actually implement that into your code, I'll bring it back to Mohammed.
Right, thank you, Sheena. So how do we do this in code? How did we do this in our skill? So one big thing that factors into using monetization APIs and in skill products is state. How do we track state in the skill? Because you're going to need to track how much the user purchased. We're going to talk a little bit later about inventory tracking, which is also you're going to be track how much they consumed out of it. So how do you track states in general? So a little bit of introduction. We have 3 scopes of how we track states or attributes in the skill. We have request-based, which are short-lived, and they only are available during the request. We have session-based, which are available during the skill session. And then we have persistent attributes, which are attributes that you can set up to persist in a DynamoDB so that they're available between launches of the skill. And you can see here, it's very simple to the get and the set for those attributes. So how would, if we're talking about a customer having access to a neighborhood, how would you track that? So, and you would probably need to store when the customer bought it, because if you're giving them timed access to the neighborhood, you want to know when that access expired. So how do you properly upsell a customer on any of the ISPs that we're presenting? How did we upsell the neighborhood, for example? So we use the upsell directive, which is basically a connections request. It's basically telling Alexa, I want to present this to the customer, and here is the message that I am going to present to the customer. And then just a quick note here is that once you do that, control is completely transferred to our systems to do that 2-step process. And your session is closed. So that's one big reason why you want to keep most purchase-related attributes persistent. And then once the customer replies, once the customer whether accepts or declines, you get a response back, and it will tell you whether the customer, what happened, and whether the customer declined or accepted your purchase. Just a quick note here is that it's the same response for, like, if you can see here, we're handling the same upsell and buy responses in the same way. This is because upsell is a 2-step process, like Sheena mentioned, and it gives the customer a little bit more information about what they're going to buy. But ultimately, if they accept and they want to move forward, then a buy request is generated. So the result for both of them is the same. And like I said before, one big thing to note here, because it's not immediately obvious, is that your session will be cleared between those requests, because you're transferring the control completely to us. So if you want your attributes, as in, for example, I just asked this customer to buy something, I want to keep track of that so that when it comes back, I want to, when it comes back, I want to figure out if I don't want to sell him again if he declined the purchase. So keeping that state needs to be in a persistent attribute. So how do you, we talk a lot about persistent attributes. How do you make your attributes persistent in an easy way? We have a very good tip for you. So we, sometime in 2018, in the revision of the Ask SDK, we introduced request and response interceptors. And these are basically interceptors that run before any request is handled and run before any response is sent. And what we are choosing to do here is very simple. We are, whenever a request comes in, we have an interceptor that copies all the persistent attributes into session. And when the response, right before the response is being sent, we are copying back all the session attributes into persistent storage. So you don't have to worry about managing these separately. You just exchange your attributes within the session, and it will automatically handle persisting them. That's it for the upsell directive, and I'm now going to hand it over to Sheena again to talk about our second aspect.
Sure. So our second aspect or feature was what I'd mentioned earlier, the potions, right? So just a quick review. So you're at the door, you say trick or treat, and now we're going to randomly generate either a candy treat, a treat sound, or a trick. And if you collect 3 tricks, then you're out of the turn and the game ends. So we wanted to kind of have a shortcut way of somebody to be able to bypass that trick. And we came up with potions. So the idea here is if you were tricked, then we will check to see if you have any potions in stock. If you do, then we'll ask you, would you like to use a potion so that you don't get scared this time around? So if you say yes, then we'll reduce your fear and you go back and you go to the next house. Or if you don't have any potions, then that would be our opportunity then to upsell the potions and ask, would you like to purchase potions? Maybe they come in packs of 100. If the customer says yes, then they have the opportunity to drink that potion, reduce their fear. But if they say no, then that game would end for them. So we talked about potions being a consumable. And let's go into some kind of CX considerations we went through when we wanted to kind of put these in. So when and how would you upsell a potion? So we talked about making sure that the customer is in the right context before we sell them something. So in this case, we want to make sure they understand the concept of a fear of getting scared when they get a trick so that they understand that they have a limited time left before their game ends. So we thought that would be the best time to sell that potion. And then, because it's a consumable, we have to also start to think about quantity, right? So we wanted to kind of come up with a number where if we sold them in a pack, that the number wasn't too large, it wasn't too small. And since our trick-or-treat skill was a seasonal skill, it's, we tend to see a large spike right before Halloween where kids are using it. They're really, looking forward to trick-or-treating. So we knew that it wasn't a skill that was a very like with a long life, but at the same time, we knew that customers would be wanting to use it over and over again over a short period of time. So we thought 100 would be kind of a good way to make sure that they had enough to last a few sessions. But yeah, so this is one of the considerations that you would have to make is basically how often does a customer come back to your skill? How frequently do they use it? How long do they use it for each time? Those are all inputs that you would use to strategize how many you would sell in a consumable. And when you actually want to get into managing that inventory, Muhammad, maybe we can share a little bit about how we would kind of track the count and manage that inventory.
Yep, thank you, Sheena. So how would you keep track of the inventory, where and how long? I mean, just to start, we don't keep track of the inventory for you. You have to we'll tell you how many the user used, but you have to figure out, we'll tell you how many the user purchased, but you're gonna have to keep track of how many they use. And I got a lot of questions about why didn't Amazon choose to track this for us rather than having us do all the tracking. We actually think that you, as a developer, tracking the inventory gives you a lot of flexibility, especially when we're talking about consumables, because you can grant people more than what they purchased in terms of like promotions or as rewards for certain actions in the games. You can do that if you're tracking the inventory yourself. It's harder if you are telling us every time somebody consumes something that they consumed it. It also allows for more flexibility around maybe when you're handling the different types of packs that you want to sell. It's the same thing, maybe it's coins or whatever, but you have a pack of 100 and a pack of 50 and a pack of, and when people consume just one, it's going to be harder to program to say, well, I'm going to keep track of which pack they consumed it from so that I can tell Amazon because they're tracking the inventory for me. So we chose to have the developer track the inventories themselves. How do we do that? So if you can see here, we have in our scale another request interceptor that basically loads how many have been purchased every time a request is getting loaded, and it's giving you control to react to the request. This is actually another very good point. Why are we doing that? Why aren't you just calling us one time, asking when the skill launches, and asking us, or periodically, and asking us how many did the user purchased? And just keeping the source of truth on your side. The big reason we're not doing that is that count may change. If, for example, the customer got refunded for whatever reason, then the count will decrease. And if you're not querying us and asking us all the time how many did the user purchase, then you may have a user who you're actually serving consumables and they don't own it anymore. We may also choose to give the user per an agreed upon promotion or whatever extra consumables, extra counts of the entitlements. So it's a very good idea to ask us every time, how many does the user have right now? And then, so now that I have a list of how many packs the user bought, how do I track what they actually used? This is where the whole count and different packs come into play, because we only see the packs that you define. We don't know how many counts are in them. So there may be a pack of 50, there may be a pack of 100. To us, these are just a single purchases of ISPs, and you need to track what they mean to you in terms of how many individual units they give to the customer. So if you can see here, we're tracking the count of what they purchased, and then we're tracking the count of what they used, and our pack is 100, so we're translating to 100 to know how many they have left. We're doing that translation between the units and the number of packs they actually purchased. This again can get as complex as you would like if you are selling different packs at different price points, and you're going to ultimately have to keep count of how much they translate to in terms of units. And then I'm going to go back to Sheena for our third aspect.
Okay, so our third aspect, helpful purchase management. This kind of covers at a very high level, just in general, how should we be handling some of these in-skill purchases, because it's such an invisible thing to the customer, right? So in a voice experience, they're offered something, they purchase it, but really they don't get that visual or even just like kind of acknowledgement that that transaction happened. They don't really have a good place to go in to see what did they purchase, are they running out? They have to kind of all do that in their mind. So we wanted to come up with a few tips based on just the things that we've been hearing and questions that we get asked in terms of how do we make this easier to the customer so that they can really trust that when they purchase something, it's something that's there, it's something that's concrete, and it's something that they could use to enhance their customer experience. So we wanted to make sure that in our skill that we are using the help intent, which is mandatory for all skills, but to also use that as a way to help customers with some of these natural questions they get about their skill. So they might forget what they've purchased, or they might want to check to see how much they have left. So they might come in to either just ask the skill for help, or they might ask, what did I purchase? What was the pack that I purchased, or how many do I have left? How many potions do I have left? Can I still go to that neighborhood, as an example? So for this next topic, we wanted to kind of address those direct questions that customers might have, but then also just this general notion of sometimes customers just say help because they don't know what to do next. They either get stuck in the game, they get stuck in at one point, or they just want to know what else they can do. So as an example, we added that help intent, and then as we found more and more customers were using it to figure out kind of how to progress in the game, we just decided, hey, that might be an interesting place for us to sell the werewolf, right? So you're coming to the help intent because you're needing help in the game, and we can offer you, hey, we can, for $1.99 or however much we want to charge for it, you can have a companion that stays with you, gives you more chance at getting better candy, and then also just makes you less scared because he's like a big burly like werewolf guy. So we thought that would be an interesting place to put it. And then, of course, if you purchase the werewolf, then it changes, some of the algorithms, or the chance to either get more candy or less fear. And then also the opportunity to have new sounds, so new fun sounds to kind of ingest in the experience. And what we found, surprisingly, was actually quite a few people bought the werewolf. So even though it was hidden in a help menu, because we caught the customer at the right time, when they were needing help, when they were looking for ways to progress, it was a very attractive offer for them. So we actually had much higher conversion than we expected on our little werewolf guy. So a couple of just kind of best practices. Thinking through what kinds of ways do we want to respond when people say help. I think at the very bare minimum, a lot of skill developers like to describe the skill or provide a couple of tips, but kind of going beyond that, thinking through, why is your customer asking for help? What are different ways that we could help them, whether it's with content, whether it's answering questions, or in our case, whether it was offering them something to kind of help their experience. And then our second question is, what would customers say to find out what they've purchased, right? So kind of really going through, this is a very natural intent. If customers spend money, they'll want to know kind of what they've purchased, what's still there. Thinking through all of the different ways your customer might ask those things would be a good way to make sure that you're covered on all the ways that we could answer that question when those come up. And then lastly, this is more just kind of like an overall CX thing, is what needs to change in the CX if they've purchased something premium. So for example, we want to make sure that if you've purchased a werewolf and he's your buddy, he's kind of going with you house to house, that we do some fun and interesting things to kind of elevate the entire CX so that you feel rewarded every time you hear him howl, or every time you're getting extra bonus candy, that it really makes a difference in your gameplay, that you've made that extra commitment to purchase something. So making sure that that we really do add a little bit more magic and delight into that CX if they've purchased something. So just to kind of recap, making sure that you're using that help intent as a way to address not just when customers are asking for help or asking direct questions, but if they're seemingly getting stuck in the skill and not knowing how to use your skill, really using that as an opportunity to answer those things. And then also, just as a tip, you can also include some of this information in your skill detail page, right? So sometimes if a customer gets frustrated with trying to use a skill, they'll go back to the detail page to be able to find those answers. So making sure that with those descriptions, you include some of this information so that you don't leave your customers lost. And yeah, with that, we'll talk a little bit about how we can actually implement the help intent.
So help intent is pretty straightforward. You just handle the intent that we send you for help, like as seen here. I think what gets tricky is the amount of information and how you present it, because unlike a visual cue, voice happens in sequence. So you want to figure out what you want to play with, what's important to the customer, and what are they looking for. So in our example here, we chose to do like 2 sections: gameplay help, which basically is just like, if you're stuck in the game, here is what you do, here is how we provide you with cues around how to make things, like how to progress in the game. But then we also have a section called product help, which, because you're now purchasing multiple types of products within the game, you may need help around them, and it's not immediately apparent that customers need that, because in a visual medium, that would be easier to get. So, for example, I want to know how many potions I used versus from the ones that I purchased. Or if I purchased a neighborhood, I want to know how when will it expire. These basic questions we need to answer, and obviously, if I'm asking for help, I'm not going to be asking immediately for product help, so that comes second to gameplay help. But for example, if you're trying to upsell the werewolf, and it's a very long queue around, hey, here is how the gameplay is, here is how like your products are, where do we insert the upsell for the werewolf within the help menu? And is it intrusive? Do we put it before we say, what do you have in terms of the current products that may not be the werewolf? Or do we put it after that? All of these are considerations that you're going to need, especially as your skills get more and more complex and as you offer more and more options. Then organizing your help intent is crucial, because a lot of people will go there when they get stuck. So in summary,
actually, before you jump into the summary, I just wanted to add to that, because I think a really good tip also is to go beyond the help intent, right? And then so if we're talking about wanting to make sure the customer feels informed with what they have left, like potions, that could be information that you could also give just during the gameplay itself, right? So like if the next time you're met with a trick, if we let them know that, hey, you have 36 potions left, would you like to use one? So just thinking about just where that information makes sense in the gameplay and then the CX, in addition to the help, I think would be a good way to make sure that these purchases don't go invisible and don't just kind of disappear, because we want our customers to use it and we want them to enjoy using the skills. So, yeah, I just wanted to expand on that point.
We've seen people be creative with where they tell people, developers be creative where they tell customers about things. They will sprinkle it out through the skill so that it's not intrusive and the help is not very long. And we've seen also people merge it within their gameplay. So the consumable and how they offer it becomes part of, like, let's say if I'm selling coins, then you sort of go to the bank and get the coins. Or if I'm selling potions, then there would be a wizard that would offer you the potion, because it's more of cues towards how you would do this in voice that work well and keep you immersed within your games.
Yep.
Okay, so going back to our summary, we talked about three aspects of how that we encountered while building our skill, which we put in the store, and you can actually play it if you want. We talked about how to use the upsell directive and when to use it, and what are best ways to keep your attributes and persistent around the change of control in session. We also talked about how when you're doing consumables, you are doing the inventory management yourself. So when to best offer consumables and what are the best practices around inventory management. And the last aspect that we found notable was, in general, how to leverage the help and how to leverage whether we upsell during the help menu or not, and what information around the product and around around both the product and the gameplay that we can offer people in the help and outside the help menu whenever is appropriate. And with that, we are done. Thank you very much, everyone.